All right, so as we are allowing the attendees to come in, I'm just going to give a brief introduction and some housekeeping rules. So for those who have come to these panels before, you might recognize me. My name is Leah Colucci. I am on the Medical Student Council for AAEM as the Vice President. And tonight our topic is basically about, we've applied, we've interviewed, we've matched, now what's going on? So we're going to be gathering tips on how to start our intern year from some wonderful residents that have volunteered to help us tonight. So some housekeeping tips for the participants. If you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. We do have some pre-submitted questions, but as we go along, anything you want to know, just drop it in the chat, just so that you know when you put it in the Q&A, if you send it to panelists, it will only go to us. If you send it to panelists and attendees, then everyone will be able to see it. All right, so to get us started, if the residents can do some introductions, tell us what year you are and where you work for residency.
I can go. So my name is Jordan Vaughn. I am a second-year resident. I'm currently at training at LSU in New Orleans.
I'm Chris McCullough. I'm an intern at UMMC in Jackson, Mississippi.
I'm John Collins. I'm a second-year resident at Sinai Grace Hospital in Detroit.
I'm Owner Yanigan. I'm a fourth-year resident over at Stanford in California.
Marvelous. So we have a variety of years. So this is great. We will see an actual intern perspective. We will see someone who has tackled intern year. And then now it's for our fourth year. It probably seems like intern year was so long ago. Residency is going to be a major transition from medical school. Do you have any tips or strategies that helped you guys manage that transition that you'd like to bestow that knowledge upon us?
All right, I guess I'm the intern, so I'll start. So I had a couple of real jobs before medical school, so I'd already kind of gotten the you have to be at work from X to Y. A lot of that was in service industry too. So I also knew that, I've lived a life where your off time is a suggestion, which is very true in emergency medicine, especially early on when you're still learning how to write notes and how to manage time. I say that like I figured it out. But you're going to wind up some of these shifts you're going to stay after couple hours because you just haven't had a time to sit down and do any kind of notes. But as far as transitioning, I think the hardest part of it was going from fourth year where you do a whole lot of nothing to, oh, I've got to work and I've got to think again. But you just take a deep breath if it feels overwhelming and just keep moving forward and you'll learn it.
I'll go next. Yeah, I totally agree with what you said, Chris. That's good stuff. I think the transition sometimes from fourth year to residency is hard. Like Chris was saying, all of a sudden you're doing a bunch of stuff that you weren't doing before, and like what you do actually matters. Not that it doesn't when you're a med student, but now you've got like real responsibilities. I think remember that residency is 3 to 4 years for a reason. You're gonna feel like kind of discouraged probably at some point in intern year, and you're going to feel like you don't know very much. And especially when you're looking at your seniors, the people over you, you're just going to be like, how am I ever going to be like them? Just trust the process and know that this is going to change really quickly. During intern year, you go from 0 to 100 and you don't really notice it happening. It just kind of all of a sudden you look back and you're like, wow, I managed that patient and I wouldn't have known how to do that before. I think another thing that'll help you, manage that transition is just love what you do. You're a physician now. You've matched to the best specialty there is. Come to work excited and eager to get better every day. Just having that attitude, it's contagious and it's going to help build rapport among your co-residents, your attendings, and your patients.
That was great. I think I think the transition is a little tough, especially when, you know, as a fourth year medical student, you're kind of like the senior in med school now. Everyone's looking up to you. I remember I was helping teach, you know, teach anatomy and teach physiology at the end of med school. And then I start residency and I'm like back at the bottom of the barrel. You're like, gosh, dang it, everyone knows more than me. And that's okay. Just accept that and understand that and realize that, you know, a few years down the road, you're going to be, again, kind of at the top, and then you're moving on to the bigger and better things. It's okay to feel like you're drowning in the beginning, and you need to realize that and understand that it's kind of designed to be that way. You know, the more you drown, the harder you have to swim and the better you get. Dive right in, you know, just really go for it. Trust your seniors, ask your seniors questions. You know, I think the best interns I work with now are the ones that come up to me with like an EKG or a set of labs and say, hey, like, what do you think's going on here? It's okay. Like, be humble and be happy and able to ask questions. There's no one expects you to know everything. No one expects you to walk into a room and come out and say, I know the diagnosis, I'm done. Like, it's okay to have questions. And if you go into it with that mindset, I think you're going to do very well.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think, you know, that switch from fourth year, like John and Chris and everyone said, you know, you're going from, you know, kind of having that free time, not really sure. And then you're going into a time where like you're responsible, you know, actually for this life. And you're actually putting in orders. You're actually trying to develop a plan for this patient. But it's so important to, like, in EM, we work as a team. And so just, you know, as many have mentioned, like, you know, rely on your teammates. You know, it's not that we want you to kind of chill back and not feel like you're a part of the team, but we want you to be able to ask questions. If you're wondering why someone did something or why one attending did this or one resident likes to do that, as you go and you develop, you're going to develop your own style. But intern year, like, just figure out the basics. Like, you're there to learn. Your style will come. And so you'll look up to so many of your attendings and seniors and be like, man, I want to be like that. But like everyone said, you'll get there. Just try to figure out or try to master the basics and that foundation of EM. And we'll talk about resources later. But over time, it'll all come, and you'll be looking back. And then when you're a second year, you'll look back at the new interns and you'll say, man, like, that's where I was a year ago. And like, look at, you know, what I've done in just a year. So it's coming.
I think it's important, you know, in med school is very structured. So you're going to have, you know, every day in med school, they're like, all right, this is what we're learning. You're in the block, you know, whatever, neuro, palm, etc. Residency is not exactly like that. You're not always going to have learning objectives for your shifts. You're essentially never going to have learning objectives for your shifts. So set some. That's going to help you grow a ton. I tried to make sure intern year, at the end of every shift, I had at least one thing to go home and learn about. And that, I think, did me wonders, because honestly, residency, wherever you go, it's going to be great. You're going to learn a lot, but I think a lot of the knowledge I've attained during residencies is my own personal studying, my own personal interest. So if you start off the bat with that, just be hungry for knowledge and set a goal for every shift, it's really going to help you grow.
Pay attention to your upper levels. Eventually, you're going to start getting sign outs from your upper levels, and you're going to take over their chart. Go back and read how they're documenting things. My MDM, medical decision making, has grown so much from day one to now, just from going back and reading, looking at how people structure their MDM, what information is actually going in there, what is extraneous information that, you know, hey, it might, you know, I thought it was important, but it's really not. Another thing too, you know, y'all have talked about we're all a team in emergency medicine. That includes the nurses, the techs, everybody in the department that you're working with. You need to get to know them well, have a good rapport with them, and it's going to make your life a whole lot better.
Wow, first question, and you guys already addressed a bunch of my fears and are reassuring them. So thank you so much. Okay, so one of my other personal worries, and so I'm hoping there are a lot of other fourth year medical students in the same boat as me this year, but a lot of us have been off of in-person rotations for quite a while, especially during COVID. Some of our most strenuous rotations recently have been some online sort of modules or you know, sign out, go home kind of deal. What can we be doing during this time before day one to keep our skills fresh and our minds fresh before we hit the ground running with intern year?
Relax. Come into intern year like just totally refreshed. But I remember people telling me that, and I was like, but no, I wanna learn something. Exactly, easier said than done. So I'll give you some of my things that I like to study, but this is of course very biased. Like everybody learns differently and everybody has their own resources, so take it for what it is. I like if you just Google AAEM 50 drugs, it'll give you this PDF of 50 drugs to memorize if you really want to get at it and you're scared because you don't know any doses, like you don't even know the dose of Tylenol and stuff like that. That's normal, totally normal. All of a sudden, you're going to have to know that stuff. So you can Google that and it'll give you 50 things to memorize. If you like videos, I like the Hippo EM videos. That's a paid resource, but if you like watching videos, those are good. I think they have a boot camp thing now. I didn't do that. But yeah, maybe somebody else knows about that one. That looked pretty cool. MRAP's got the C3 podcast, which kind of just covers a core topic. If you like listening to stuff, that's cool. And then MRAP also released this encyclopedia called Corpendium. I don't know if anybody's checked that out yet. I think it's amazing. It's quickly become one of my favorite study tools. If I had that during the transition from fourth year to intern year, I definitely would have hit that up and just gone through each chapter. But that's my biased list of things you can do if you really can't handle yourself and have to, get studying.
MRAP also has videos on YouTube for free. You can go and watch those. They have several that are just procedure videos. Some of them, like lateral canthotomies. You probably won't have done one of those by now. Some of our upper levels have never done them. But hey, they've got a video on it, so you can be, all right, we see you with your two. But you can see some of those procedures and come in kind of having an idea of what they're going to look like. I think it's MCRIT has a free podcast for sure. Really good podcast. But I believe they also do a list, like a series where they go over, like, forget exactly what it's called, but basically just like small minutia of different procedures. So like on a central line, when you're dilating, if you twist, it'll do a little bit better. Just little stuff like that. But like we've said before, relax, enjoy your time off, because you're going to hit the ground running when you get there. And it's not going to slow down for a while. You're going to be overwhelmed for a while, and then it's going to get better.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you're diving into like a new world, and it's hard to prepare for that. I mean, medical school to residency is honestly very different, and you're going to learn a lot of medicine, but you're now going to have to apply it and think of multiple different variables and put it all together. And it's just something you kind of just have to do to learn, and it's hard to prepare for. And you got to realize, especially intern year, I mean, for me, I think first year of residency, we spent maybe 3 months total in the ED. We spend so much time on off-service rotations, OB, ICU, anesthesia, ortho, all these other things. So don't just focus solely on EM if that's even what you're going to do. My recommendation would be to honestly relax. For me personally, the way I learn best is by doing question banks. So I actually got Rosh Review early, which I think is one of the best question banks in emergency medicine. And I just would do like 20 questions a day for the month leading up to intern year. And that, it helped me a lot. I got a lot of questions wrong, like a lot of questions wrong. But that's okay, at least kind of give me an idea of what kind of things I'm going to learn. There's a lot of resources, so you can look up like the most common presentations in emergency medicine, or even reach out to some of the seniors and say, hey, like, what are some common things you see? And look into those, look into like a basic chest pain workup, look up in the management of COPD and DKA and musculoskeletal injuries, and those type of basics things that you're going to see every single day. And maybe just read up on those. But otherwise, when you get in the department, you're going to see it, you're going to figure it out, and that's okay. Enjoy your free time while you can. I promise you're going to learn everything.
Yeah, I have nothing to add because I would just be repeating everything everyone said. All the resources that John used, I use all the same exact resources. So those are pretty like spot on in addition to question banks and using Rosh. But I was also one of those people that were like, I can't chill, like I have to do something. So like when I would work out, I would literally do like EM cases, or I would listen to the C3 podcast, because I mean they're short, they're quick to it, and then they kind of give you that like refreshing and have you start like thinking of things again. But outside of that, I wasn't really doing anything else but relaxing and enjoying the free time I had before. So don't feel bad about that. Like just kind of take it all in. Intern year is going to come, and it's going to come regardless. So just kind of really like relax, enjoy family, friends, loved ones, all before starting residency.
Well, I feel way less bad about all the Gilmore Girls I binged today. So thank you guys. I did a lot of relaxing. You guys mentioned a lot of tools and resources. Are there any other tools and resources that you use regularly throughout residency or intern year that you haven't mentioned, whether they're paid or free?
I would say daily, I use WikiEM. It's like WikiEM, WIKEM. It's like a Wikipedia for emergency medicine, and I'm telling you, it's very, very good. I use it very, very often, and I'd probably be a crappy doctor without it. But no, honestly,
it's legit.
Yeah,
it's legit.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and they actually cite a lot of their references when they put management recs and everything. So I'd recommend giving that a shot and just taking a look at it on shift. I think that and Up to Date are kind of my two biggest, at least on shift. And then there's apps you can download. I think PD Stat is good. For any time you get a pediatric code that comes in, or any kind of pediatric resuscitation. And then get a stroke code app. Definitely get a stroke code app, because you are not going to remember the whole NIHSS, especially when a patient comes up in front of you and their face is drooping and and they don't look good. So yeah, I have a stroke code app, and I literally pull it up and I get my NIHSS off that. So I think those are the big things: WikiEM, stroke code app, PD Stat, and then if you want like a micromedics type thing to look up drugs, dosing, etc.
I have an app called the Difficult Airway app. I think it was like $2 or $3. But Dr. Slick, that was at the VA, she's like one of the big like airway gurus. She actually has that app, and she kind of told me about it. So anyone who's like kind of worried about airway kind of stuff, or that does airways their intern year, that would be a good app to have.
Everything that's already been said. I haven't tried the Airway app, but I might have to look into it. MD Calc, which I'm sure most people are already using anyway, but you can set your favorites. So especially if it's something that you don't use often and you're not going to remember it, off the top of your head, you can just pull it up. Got a Snellen chart for an eye exam. Also got the NIH on there. And then the Ultimate Emergency Medicine Guide is great for the ITE.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. This is a great list.
What about specific rotations like OB, ICU? Are there any things that we should resources that we should prepare for, or extra apps that would be specific for those sorts of specialties?
I really utilized EM Crit, and I still do. I'm a second year, and I just got off of ICU, and I heavily use that. There's like the EM Crit like logbook, but they also have podcasts that you can listen to that are kind of like short and by topic and kind of to the point. But they have like the ebook online where you, as like kind of like maybe a couple weeks before I went into ICU, I kind of would just start reviewing it and going over like the common presentations in the ED. Or that you'll get or that you'll admit to the ICU. Although you'll have like a senior with you, it just is helpful to kind of be familiar with the processes and kind of to have like a general approach to management. So I found that very helpful.
I honestly had a hard time getting too fired up for my off-service stuff, especially as an intern, because I just wanted to be in the ED. It's like, why do you keep farming me out to these other residencies that I didn't match into? But So to try and keep myself sane, I kind of use the same resources we talked about and just really drilled down on the things I would potentially see in the emergency department. And if that ever came up, like when I was on OB, if some ED presentation came in, like I definitely wanted to know that. But yeah, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think ED is pretty comprehensive. So a lot of the stuff that you're going to see, you can find in our resources. Like for OB, you're going to know about or be able to find resources about things like preeclampsia and deliveries and all the other stuff that can happen in our own resources. I would say it is pretty important though to do your best to perform on your off-service rotations, because one, it makes your department look good, but two, you really want to build those relationships with the residents and the other services, because you're going to be calling them in the middle of the night saying like, hey, I got this patient. Sometimes it's a crappy admit. It's like, this is a soft call, but I really need you to observe this patient overnight because my attending wants you to. But it's good to develop those strong working relationships. So try your best to perform, and you can ask questions on those rotations. There's nothing wrong with that. But ask those residents what they use too. When I was on ortho, I asked the ortho residents like, hey, what's your guys' resources? Like, what do you go to? Because there's so many different fractures. And they're telling me about like ortho bullets and other apps that they use. So definitely ask around.
Dr. McCoy, do you have anything else?
Like you said, pay attention to make sure you perform. We all want to do the procedures when we're off service, but off service people start to notice if that's all you want to do. And if you're there at the bedside, ready to work with just inpatient patient care, they're a lot more likely to, hey, we've got this procedure. Do you want to jump in on it? But other than that, I think WorkLife has at least a good start for the inpatient side of things, and you can kind of jump off from there, but nothing else to add. Yeah,
you'll realize how valuable you are off service. I mean, I've had an OB attending ask me to consult ENT on a patient because they were having ear pain. And I was like, I can look in the ear. I've got this. And they loved me. To me, it's like the simplest thing in the world. I've literally looked in this patient's ear and I was like, yes, they have otitis media. We can fix that. But I just realized that like subspecialties really subspecialize and they don't have as broad of a spectrum as we do. Of course, they know their specialty a little bit better than we do, but in terms of the general scene, we're ready to handle and see a majority of things. So realize that and be open to that and be helpful. They'll love you.
All great advice. And while we're on the topic of studying, we only have 2 more submitted questions about studying, so I promise we'll wrap those up quickly. But how exactly do residents study? Do they keep a journal of like the patients that they've seen or workups they've done throughout residency? Is it more questions? How is it different than medical school studying?
So work itself is studying. Just being at work, going through, it's muscle memory. For a lot of it, it's you get that chest pain comes in and you know exactly what the workup is going to be. If there's some weird presentation of it that, you might need to go sideways on that workup a little bit and look for something else with it, you start to pick that up and start to get that muscle memory. Beyond that, we still have to study for the ITE. We still have to study for step 3 in first or second year, depending on when your program wants you to take it. Question banks work for me. Sounds like I'm not the only one. But then also like that emergency medicine guide, the book that I mentioned earlier, that helps. But looking stuff up on shift and what's the management of this? What do I need to treat with? How do I treat? What's the dosages? A lot of it's muscle memory.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you learn just a ton on shift treating patients. It's great when work is actually study as well. Actively managing your patients will teach you a ton. I think, like I said, I try to learn one thing at the end of every shift, at least have something to go home and read, or at least I did. I probably should still, but lately, end of residency and I am tired. But that, and then ask your consultants question. So when you call a consultant for recommendations on a patient and they say, yeah, do this and this, ask them, like, hey, for just for my personal education, why'd you decide to go with this instead of that? You'll learn so much from your consultants. And I try to do that often because it teaches you a ton. And it's not like you don't know or you're being dumb. You're just genuinely curious, and they really appreciate that often. And it'll help you down the road when you're like, oh, I'm just going to order this, and then I'll call the consultant at the end because I already know what they would want. So I think there's that. For me, I did a lot of question banks. I did a lot of Rosh review. I went through it. I think I've been through it like twice now or something, maybe 2.5 times. But that's the way I learned best, is going through question banks and definitely like reading the explanations of why the answers are wrong. That taught me a ton. So go through it and take your time, and you'll learn a bunch.
I think it's definitely challenging to find time to study. It's going to vary depending on what your rotation is. I think some months, maybe if your ICU block's really busy, like you might not be able to have dedicated study time. You might need just to have dedicated sleep time instead. But on your lighter months, I'd say make sure that you're taking advantage of it and reading and catching up on all the things you wanted to learn about. I think it's good to keep a list of things that happen throughout the day that you don't know or like we're totally clueless on. I have a very long document in my notes app on my phone that I, during a shift, especially off service, I just whip it out and like jot down a bullet point of what it was I didn't know. And then as I read on it, I delete it's like a war trying to erase that document, but I'm like hopelessly behind now. It's like pages and pages long, but I think that's really good to just pick up what you didn't know when you're in the hospital. The question talked about a journal. I think med students see residents keeping track of patients like different ways. We have to document our procedures and different things that we do in residency. So I think a lot of people are kind of keeping track of their patients because of that. And then also it's kind of a way to keep track of your workflow as well. Everyone's got their own weird system of how to keep track of whether they've got their workup ordered or whether their notes done on that patient so their attending doesn't get mad at them. So yeah, that's the journal thing. I think it's also good when you have a journal, you can follow up on interesting cases and learn a lot from those. If you kind of like make a note to yourself, hey, I have no idea why I admitted this patient. I wonder what the diagnosis is. You can learn a lot. So.
Yeah, I do a very similar thing as John as far as like just having a notepad. And if there's anything that comes up during shift, I'll kind of just jot a note about it so I can read on it later. I think you just have to I think the biggest thing for me and the hardest thing for me intern year was like figuring out a schedule. Working out was like my piece. And so if it wasn't like, oh, I slept, I'm rested, like I have time to do something else, I would try to find things that I could like listen to or do while I was working out. And then some days I was like, I'm not listening or doing anything work related. I'm just going to work out. And so days are going to, you have to do what's right for you. But as you go, you'll find days and it'll wax and wane versus like heavier versus lighter rotations, and you'll kind of find time to fit it in.
Wonderful, thank you. We had a couple questions come in about step 3. So when are you planning to take step 3, or did you already take step 3? And how many weeks did you give yourself to prepare for it?
So I just took it a couple of weeks ago. I decided to give myself a month, and every time I looked at UWorld, it was like, nope, nope, nope. If I could go back and do it again, I'd like to say that I would do it earlier, because there's a lot of back-end workup that you're going to have, that they're going to want you to know about some things. We don't do that. So what's the third step in the workup of hyperthyroidism? I have no idea. And, that's just not something we do. So it might help to do it earlier, but I also know that I would still procrastinate just like I did and wind up taking it when I had to.
So I think the biggest thing you can do for yourself is just wherever program you're going to, they are going to have some sort of deadline. So figure out whatever deadline your program has established or when they want you to take it. I think everyone I talk to is always going to say, I wish I would have took it earlier. I just took mine in December as a second year because my deadline was December. So don't be like me. But I would say that EM has a leg up, I feel like, on other specialties because we are very well-rounded when it comes to things. So I didn't find that I had to study as much as my other friends in other specialties, just because a lot of the test is geared to us. Like, you're going to kill the case day just because a lot of the things are patients presenting in the ED. And by the time you get to like the end of first year, you're like, oh, I've been doing this. So there are a lot of nuances that you will have to make yourself familiar with, but it may not take you as much time as it might take other people in other specialties that are more like specialized, like OB or, I don't know, ENT or whatever other specialty.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We have it way easier than other specialties because we see so much in the ED. In my residency, I've noticed there's two strategies of when to try and take this exam during intern year. Some people will schedule it purposely during their easiest block, kind of at the end of it, so they have like some dedicated time to get ready for the exam. That's what I did. It worked out fine. Some risky people like to schedule it during their worst block because they think that they're going to be able to finagle extra time off for step 3, which I think is really risky. So like we have had people in my year put it during their trauma surgery block because they're going to try and, you know, swing like a 2 or 3 day extra off time during that block. So I don't recommend that, but, you know, do what you want.
Yeah, I think I took it March of intern year, and I only took it that month because it was one of our easy blocks. And I just figured whatever. I gave myself like two and a half weeks to prep, maybe. I honestly didn't do a whole lot of prep. I just figured just knock it out, get it done with. I did fairly well. I mean, I didn't like to echo everyone else. I think you get prepared well in just being an EM resident, and you're going to be fine. Just the only thing I'd say is do some of the practice things online to figure out how to do those weird cases you have to do, just because the format's kind of funky. So just to customize yourself with that. But otherwise, I think you'll all kill it.
Okay, glad to hear that it's not as daunting as step 1 or 2, because none of my family is ever had to take any of that. So when I try to explain to them these board exams, they're like, wait, there's a step 3? Like, I thought you graduated med school. But okay, so one common thing that you have all brought up is like a work-life balance, finding some sort of schedule. Can you talk a little bit more about how you found that work-life balance and how that worked for you?
All right. Crickets. They're working on their work-life balance. I'll go next. So honestly, for me, I knew it was important to me to find things that I was passionate about to keep me driven, because residency can be challenging. My one thing for me is obviously like fitness. I don't know, obviously, like I hope obviously, but being healthy is important to me. So, you know, I've always made that a big part of residency for me. And I honestly made my workouts like a part of my shift. It either happens before I go to work or after I go to work. And it's not that excuse of like, do I have time? It's just, hey, I add on an hour to my shift. So it's a part of it. But the other thing is like find things that, for me, it was important to find something that could somewhat keep me in medicine, but also interested in having fun. So I started doing a lot of volunteer event medicine, and actually became medical director of a big volunteer event medicine organization out here. So I got to go, you know, I was like the doctor for Levi Stadium for all the 49ers games, and then at the Chase Center for the Warriors games. And then I was doing a bunch of concerts and stuff. And it was super fun for me because I got to be out in the EMS community and hanging out with people and doing stuff. But it also really, really made me, at least in my opinion, better at my job, because I was out there on my own making challenging decisions, deciding if a patient needs to go to the hospital or back out into the stadium, like on my own. So it really pushed me, and it also just, it was so fun, and it kept me interested in medicine. So I think the important thing is just to find something that kind of fuels you and drives you, and do that, and you will be happy. I'm happy.
I can't add anything to that. That was an amazing answer.
All I would say to that is that it will take time. Like I'm still have a long ways to go as far as being well-rounded. I've came a long way since the beginning of intern year, but just be kind to yourself. It takes time. You will figure it out.
I feel like emergency medicine, just because of tends to have a slightly better work-life balance in residency. We're working 18 shifts a month, 22 shifts a month, depending on where you're at in training. And our colleagues in other specialties are 6 days a week and could be 2.5 weeks without having a day off. But, we have our 8 or 12-hour shifts, then we're off. And, I found that I was talking with my wife earlier about it. And, she was pointing out, you have less time that you're actually here. I did have my ICU rotation. That was terrible. But as long as you're on service. But, you have less time that you're actually home than fourth year. But the time that you're home, you tend to be able to dedicate that to whatever you want to do. And then it's just at that point, learning to not feel guilty about this is me time. At least that's been my problem.
And treat yourself because you deserve it. That's my motto for this year.
Yeah, you all have so much time to learn medicine. Like you have a lot of time to learn medicine, like the rest of your life. So as long as you're learning at somewhat of a pace, do not drive yourself insane thinking you need to catch up to the fourth years and the third years. Like pace yourself. This is just like any other race. You got to pace yourself. You sprint in the beginning, you're going to burn out. And burnout is super real in emergency medicine. You do not want that to happen to you. So if you just try to sprint off the line, you're going to end up hurting yourself. Just take it slow, learn, work hard, but also play hard. Just don't do anything stupid.
They were joking in the chat about ICU rotation. And, that brings up that just, it's going to be a month. You're going to get through it. And then you're going to be back in the department, whether it's the month after or a little bit, 2 months later, but you're going to be back home and it's going to get better.
So you're bringing up a challenging rotation. So I think this is a good time to ask, what rotations were the most challenging and which ones were the most rewarding?
I would say my most rewarding, I loved ICU. I love critical care. And so I found it challenging, but it was also rewarding. And I feel like I grew a lot from that rotation, intern year and even second year when you are like the upper level on a team after being an intern for so long. But I feel like the most challenging, although it was so fun, was my trauma surgery month. I think that was the first like 28, 30-hour call I had ever worked. And, you learn some things about yourself during that rotation. And it was so fun, but you really grow during your trauma month.
And the good thing about off-service rotations, I think it just reinforces your good decision in choosing emergency medicine. Like doing those calls, man, I'm just so glad that we don't have to do call. Yeah, I think that I think that it just depends on like which hospital you're at. Sometimes, everyone's got like different rotations that are notorious for being really hard, and some are, kind of more relaxed. For me, I think the autonomy was what made the I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. I think the more autonomy I had, the more rewarding the block was. And because I got used to having a lot of autonomy in the ED. So when I did blocks where I felt like I was kind of just an advanced medical student again, those blocks were especially difficult.
Yeah, I would say in terms of my most rewarding blocks, I think one was our county hospital system when I was in ED there. It's a different site for us. It's very fast paced, a lot of critical care, a lot of autonomy. I mean, there were times, I think when I was a second year, even there were times where we had two patients crashing at once and I had to intubate one and my attending had to intubate the other. And he's like, don't mess it up. And I was like, all right. It really helped me grow. That autonomy was stressful, but it pushed me to be better. I think probably my hardest rotation was surgical ICU because I did it first month of second year and I was alone on nights managing a surgical ICU, and it was pretty scary. Having some pretty sick, like post-op liver transplant patients that were very ill. And I was a little nervous at first, but fortunately, I had my seniors down in the ED and I could literally just call them, be like, hey dude, I got this patient here. He's not doing too hot. Can you give me some advice? And a couple of times, even one of them came up and helped me out, like helped me manage a patient. And that was awesome because you'll realize like how much this team matters and how much of a family EM is. Like you won't see that in other specialties. You'll even see like when you watch other specialties like medicine sign out, when they sign out, they want to be out. They want nothing else to do with it. But you'll see in EM, like people are willing to help you out. They're willing to stick around for a little bit if they need to help manage a patient. It's much more of a family. So really embrace that and be open to that. But I think everyone's going to have a different challenge in different rotations. Some of us are going to be really challenged in, anesthesia because some of us have a tough time with airways, need practice. Some people have a really tough time with things like OB because they had a very poor experience in medical school. So you're going to have your challenge, and whatever it is, that's what you need to focus on the most, and just dive in and try your hardest, and you'll get better at it. I mean, that's literally how we get better, right? We push ourselves at what we suck at. So, yeah.
I've got nothing to add. I mean, medical ICU was the most difficult so far, and that was a time thing. I like the pathology that's there, so I really enjoyed it. The pathology part of it, but again, it's days a week, and it's just a lot more strenuous as far as the work hours.
So we had brought up some of these longer shifts, these 28, 30-hour shifts. And we talked a lot about resources. So I want to combine some things here and ask, what are some supplies that we should have? One, for those long shifts, like things that you don't think about bringing on a 28-hour shift, like should we bring a toothbrush, things like that. And then other must-haves that we should have, whether it be in the ED, like, a stethoscope clip or something like that.
Please don't carry a stethoscope clip. I'm just going to jump in and say that. I want to step back now.
Good to know. These are the things that we need to know.
Bring food or money for food. That's like the most important thing. I don't know, when I'm in the ED, I don't usually get to get food. And then all of a sudden when I'm off service, I have time, especially if you're in the hospital overnight, like you're going to have to eat a few times. Hopefully you have time to do that. I'm kind of weird. I would bring a change of socks if I was in the hospital, like for 30 hours, just because after about 16 hours, it just kind of felt a little sticky. So you don't have to do that. That's what I did.
I don't know
if
Josh's comment here, but do we need the Leatherman Raptor? And I'm already equipped with the Patagucci jacket, so.
I do have the Raptor, the Leatherman Raptors. I think they're awesome. I've used everything on them from like the ring cutter to, a lot of times your techs will be slow at taking the patient's clothes off in trauma, and that's something, exposure really does matter, and especially if you're a junior and you can help with that, it's key. So getting a good pair of trauma shears actually does help. I carry them with me at all times. Stethoscope, obviously. I do use a stethoscope clip because I hate having it hanging around my neck, especially if you end up doing a procedure or something. I remember I watched someone getting cannulated onto ECMO, and then the person's stethoscope fell onto the person's groin. And it was just like, I was like, oh. Then your stethoscope falls into an abscess. Like, all in all, like, just get a stethoscope clip. I think it's really useful. Make sure you have at least 2 pens. You will lose a pen, 100%. I lose pens all the time, and it makes me extremely sad because I actually Googled what the best pen is, and I bought a bunch of them. So when I lose them, it really hurts my heart. What else? A good pen light. Make sure you have a good pen light. You're not always going to be able to use one of those ones off the wall, the ophthalmoscopes, because half the time they'll either be broken or won't work. The best pen is called the Jetstream. Get the Jetstream. Those are the big things. I always have a tourniquet, but that's just because sometimes in trauma, either EMS doesn't apply a tourniquet, and the tourniquets are in the Pyxis, and someone has to go run to the Pyxis or whatever your guys' med cabinet is to get one. So I always have one just on my pack. There's been a couple of times where I've just asked the tech, like, hey, run to my pack and grab my tourniquet so I can put it on. So I think those are the big things, I'd say. So 2 pens, stethoscope with a clip if you want it, a good pair of trauma shears, plus minus a tourniquet, a good attitude. Bring those.
I'm going to second a tourniquet, because when that arterial bleed comes in and nobody can find a tourniquet or can't get into the Pyxis, or something's going to go wrong when you need it, and if you know exactly where it is or it's on your person, it's right there and you're ready, and then you're talk to your upper levels, find out if you're going to be overnight on an off service. If there's one that's just not super busy overnight, bring a book, bring a computer with access to Netflix, something, because you can say you're going to sit there and, watch EKG Weekly or, listen to MRAP all night, and it's just not going to happen.
That's one thing too, Chris brought up. Before every rotation, find a second year or upper level that you like vibe with, or that maybe you're similar to as far as like studying or the way that you practice or whatever, if you can, or just ask anyone. But like before you start a rotation, they've done it before. They've worked the same system that you have. So just like ask, like before I start any rotation, I just say, hey, I'm about to start this rotation. Like anything that you found helpful, anything that you brought, anything that you felt like you needed. And those are like going to be your most vital resource for your specific program. So I definitely do that still to this day with my upper levels whenever I go to new rotations.
Eye covers too. Back to that arterial bleed, you need something to cover your face. That or when you're doing an abscess.
Wow, I got way more resources there than I was expecting out of that question. So I really appreciate that. You have been showering us with advice all evening, but what is the best piece of advice that you were given before your intern year, or something you wish you had known before you had started?
I have 2 things. One is, as an intern, if you ever have a chance to watch your seniors or some of the attendings like actually run a resuscitation, don't be idle in that. Like mentally try and work through what you would do and see if they do what you were thinking. Because all of a sudden, a sick patient's going to come through the resus bay and it's going to be you running the show. And it's much less painful if you've kind of mentally like gone through that in your mind before everyone's staring at you looking for direction. And then I would also say, try and get in the habit of avoiding deferring to your attending when deciding on a management plan for a patient. Like envision yourself as the attending and push yourself to commit to a decision. Don't kind of wax and wane about, well, this patient could have a PE. I don't know if I want to dimer them or send them to the scanner. Like just commit to something. You got to run it by somebody more senior than you anyways. Commit and really, put yourself in that spot. Force yourself to really mentally work through the problem. I think it makes it a lot easier when you progress and become more senior, and then you really are having to commit on stuff.
Yeah, I think a few things. One, I know y'all get used to writing down labs and your history on paper when you're in med school before you present. Often medical students will come up and say, yeah, this is a 59-year-old female with blah, blah, blah. as soon as you can, try to drop that habit. You really don't want to have to write stuff down in the ED. You want to be able to start committing stuff to mental memory and develop that strong, because soon you're going to be running your own pod with, whatever, 12 patients, 13 patients. And you want to be able to kind of just take the key pieces of information, kind of have them in the back of your mind, and be able to, when your nurse is like, hey, the guy in 6 is coding, you can be like, okay, this patient was here with hyperkalemia. I know why they're probably coding. So get used to keeping information in your head. I think be confident, but be humble. You're early on, the nurses don't know you, the techs don't know you, no one knows you. And you need to earn their trust, and you need them to be comfortable with when you say, I think we should do this, that they're like, okay, let's do it. And part of that is by saying things confidently. When you're running a code or something, they say, hey guys, we're going to summarize. I think this patient's in, VFib cardiac arrest. I think we need to shock them. If that doesn't work, we're going to do this, this, and this, and lay out a plan and say it confidently. You may be wrong, and that's okay. It's your attending or your senior will correct you, but at least people will say, hey, this person knows what they're talking about, or at least is confident in what they say. But when you're wrong, be humble and say it's okay. There's no room for pride in emergency medicine. I've been wrong many times, and being okay with that is part of what we do. You're going to have a lot of tough times. You're going to have a lot of challenging cases. And I think in emergency medicine, we suck at keeping count. It's very easy for us to forget all our saves, but we just hold on to every loss, and that can eat away at you and really, really make it tough for you. I mean, even that patient that you get that comes in with urosepsis and you give them a dose of antibiotics and admit, we often just forget about that, but you literally saved that person's life, right? If you didn't recognize that, if you didn't treat them, they probably would have died at home. But when you get a patient that comes in cardiac arrest and you couldn't bring them back, that haunts you, which isn't right. And it's not fair to you, because honestly, you're battling death and you're trying to bring someone back from it. And it's challenging, and the odds are stacked against you. So make sure at the end of the day, you kind of reflect and say, well, I saw a lot of patients and I helped a lot of people. And if some cases go south, that's the nature of what we do. We can't play God here. Try to find things that are going to bring you joy throughout residency and latch onto those. And when things get tough, really engage those things, whatever it is, whether it's family time, whether it's playing video games or exercise. And always remember at the end of the day why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of us went into emergency medicine for different reasons. And when time gets tough and you're in your darkest moments, go back to that and remember it, and it will get you through it. And you'll come out on the other end and you're going to be so happy. I mean, at the end of my residency now, I just got a job. I'm going to be, moving pretty soon. I have 6 weeks of clinical stuff left, and I've had a lot of ups and downs, but looking back, I'm very happy. And I think it's because I've been able to hold on to the reasons why I went into this. And I've been able to really get better at thinking about all the patients that I've saved, and learning from the ones that I couldn't, and stopped blaming myself. So the biggest thing you could do is to not put blame on yourself for these things, because you are doing amazing things. You are fighting a fight many people do not have the strength or desire to. So good on you. It's awesome.
Find somebody you trust. Kind of bouncing off of that with the dark times. Find somebody you trust, someone who you vibe with, going back to that, and be able to debrief with them, especially if they're a colleague or something. Hey, this particular thing is really bothering me. And, sometimes it'll just be, hey, this is bothering me. Sometimes it might be, what did I do wrong? And being able to learn from that. But being able to unload that and have someone else who's understanding of where you're at, where you're coming from, can be huge sometimes. And then again, just look to your upper levels, watch what they're doing, think along with them what they're doing. If you look at a chart and see, I don't know what, why did you do this? Don't sit there and ask that just to yourself. Ask your upper levels. They're there to teach you.
I think it's important to have a support system within different circles. So whether that be your partner, someone that may be in or not in medicine, someone within your program that you feel like you can go to that knows your exact struggle or what you're going through because they've been through all that stuff at your specific program. But I also have people that I match into EM with that are at different programs around the country that I graduated med school with. And to this day, we have difficult cases that we've been through or whatever. And we're at different institutions and programs, but we all go through the same things. So it's just nice to kind of have them as an outlet and be able to kind of just make what we're going through feel real. Because your partner, your family may not always understand where you're coming from, and although they may be able to like love you and support you in that way, it may not be necessarily what you need. So just kind of make sure that you get that support, that you have like different outlets of support around you from different backgrounds. I think I found that very helpful.
Well, we are very close to the end here. So as we close out in these last few minutes, is there any other advice you want to bestow upon us or anything else that you want to leave us with in these last few moments before we hit the end button? Or have you given us everything you've got?
I'll reiterate, breathe. You know, I'm towards the tail end of intern year now, and looking back at, you know, some of my first days and just the confusion and having no idea what was going on, having no workflow of my own, just trying to figure that out. And now I look at it and, you know, seeing how many patients I'm juggling at a time, how many of those are critically ill patients, you know, how many of those workups are bread and butter workups now. You'll get there. And, you know, I look at my upper levels and see what they're handling, and you're going to get there too. I'm going to get there too. And eventually we're going to be like, this guy, congratulations. And we're going to have real jobs.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, congrats. This is exciting times. And thank you for joining emergency medicine during a pandemic. I mean, I'm sure that's not, you know, it wasn't an easy decision, but we really appreciate having you on the team. Enjoy this, you know, last few months before you dive in. Take some time for yourself. You're going to have a lot of time to become a great emergency medicine physician. So live it up a little bit. Don't stress out too much. It's going to come. You know, there's no point in fearing the inevitable. You know, when I was in the Marine Corps Infantry, that was the first thing one of my sergeants told me when we were getting ready to deploy. He said, there's no point in fearing the inevitable. It's going to come. All you can do is prepare for it, right? And enjoy the time you have. So live it up, and hope to see y'all out there.
Well, we appreciate your time tonight, and I at least feel much more prepared and way less scared going into intern year. So I hope that the other attendees feel the same way, and all of those that get to watch this later on hope that they feel a better sense of calm and peace that you guys have brought with all of this advice. So we thank you so much, and we can't wait to see what you guys do in the future. Have a great night.